Imam Talib. Let's give him his flowers real quick, man. You know,
I
and
mean,
as far as who,
it's part of history again. There arose with the success of the COINTELPRO operations against the Black Panther Party, against other Black radical organizations. By 1970, 71, you know, the so-called Black Power movement, the so-called uh, the so-called civil rights movement had been completely or irrevocably divided and neutralized. And out of this arose a whole group of young African Americans um, who, in searching for a means of struggle, began to gravitate towards Islam, and they created the Dar es Salaam movement in the eastern United States. This was a massive movement of Orthodox Islam. It was completely contrary to the practices of the Nation of Islam at that time. At that time, the Nation of Islam was not following the Mathab and the Hadiths of Orthodox Muslims. And so that, having said that, this movement became sensationalized with a robbery. I mean, with an expropriation attempt at a arms dealer at a gun store in New York, where a police officer was killed, and 3 Muslims from the Dar movement were taken into custody, and they went through trial and they were given the death penalty. And at this time, the United States saw that this movement of Muslims was germinating and taking hold in poor communities, especially Black communities and Latino communities. So they engaged in an operation to destroy this movement, this Dar es Salaam movement, and they employed I believe it was a Wahhabi cleric who claimed to be some type of authority or whatever, who fomented violence and division within the Dar movement and the faction. Now, out of this movement came the likes of Imam Talib and Imam Alamin, Latif Alamin. Out of these things came imams from the African diaspora who were dedicated Muslims, who were principled men, and who reached into the prisons to support those of us who were in prison and who were subject to the ultimate repression, the prison environment. Some of them were chaplains. Now, it needs to be noted that if you go into the history, New York State prisons didn't have Muslim mosques and places for Muslim prayer. It was the Nation of Islam that filed a suit in New York federal court for equal treatment religion, that they had to institute Muslim chaplains. And some of the first Muslim chaplains was Imam Talib and Imam Latif Alamin and other brothers like this. These were brothers that came into the prison and taught us. They came into the prisons and questioned our treatment when we were being beaten and thrown into the box. They would lead us in prayer. They were very much a part of our very ability to practice Islam in the prisons. And Imam Talib was one of those men. And he was the type of man that used to come visit me when they would throw me in the hole and ship me 300 miles north in isolation in the winter. Imam Talib might show up at any moment and knock on my bars and say, "Salaam alaikum, brother, you okay?" You see, that's why his passing, that's why his passing devastated me so. I've known that man for over 30, 40 years.
yes, yes.
And he was a good man. And so whenever a good man passes, it takes something out of humanity, takes something away from the rest of us. And I'm just grateful that he built the masjid, the MIB in Harlem, that came out of Malcolm's vision of the Muslim
Mosque Incorporated.
Muslim Mosque Incorporated. that he, you know, he has some comrades that I've pounded the big yard with, like Mikhail DeVoe, who will stand up, who will be the next man up in the Imam's image, and I'm grateful for that. He also is a soldier, and he will step up. So
Yeah.
that's gratifying for me to know. So I didn't intend to go off on this tangent, and neither did you.
No, it's good and it's necessary, because I remember, you know, years ago us visiting his masjid together, hanging out, and then even I think it was maybe a few weeks ago when we was cracking jokes because you were saying you were there at the masjid, and I was like, man, you know, poor Imam. I'm like, you know, I'm telling him like, man, you know, I'm gonna make dua for you. You over there, you got him up in the
Well, you know,
masjid.
it's ironic. It's ironic you mentioned that because two days before he passed, Jamal Joseph, who was one of the 21, and my comrade in the Black Panther Party in the BLA, we sat with Imam Talib, and he served us coffee from his wheelchair
Wow.
and we talked about old times, and we laughed about those days when we didn't have anything, when we was, you know, struggling and everything. And we had that little joy. And I remember him sitting in the door in his wheelchair as we got on the elevator. He said, man, it was wonderful to have this talk. And that was the last time I saw him alive.